President Trump and his allies say today's move will help fix what they claim is an education system that comes in dead last. The numbers tell a more nuanced story, though. The US ranks amongst the top countries for educational attainment, according to the OECD. That's based on the percentage of people who obtain at least a high school degree. But in recent years, US students have been falling behind in reading skills. Some say that trend could get worse without the Department of Education. Jon Valant is the director of the Brown Center on Education Policy at the Brookings Institution. He joins me now. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, what's your biggest fear about the dismantling of this umbrella body overseeing the education system?
So I think we should be clear about what is happening and what is not happening. It looks like this executive order, as your previous guest said, is stopping short of calling for a true elimination of the department or even moving or eliminating some of its core functions, because the president can't do that unilaterally. That would require an act of Congress, and actually it would require 60 Senate votes, which means getting Democrats that will never be on board for this. But what they can do and what they have done is they can undermine the department's ability to do sort of its core functions. And they do that by removing staff. And so what we may be seeing, and where I'm expecting to see some harms from the actions they've taken, is the department does things like it administers the IDEA program in legislation, which provides funds and protections for students with disabilities. And the people who work at the department, part of what they do is they make sure that those funds get to the places they're supposed to go, and they make sure that the funds are spent in the ways they're supposed to be spent. So if you're a parent of a child with a disability, your kid is entitled to some of those funds and some of those protections from the federal government. And if we have too few people working in the department, and if the department just isn't functioning in the way it's supposed to, you risk all kinds of fraud and misuse of funds and abuse, where those funds might make their way to school districts but never actually get to your kid. And your kid might not get those protections they're supposed to get. So I think what's most likely going to happen from this is just that sort of general dysfunction.
It depends, though, doesn't it? If he completely starves it of resources, it won't be able to do anything. Even if it does exist, as you say, they can't close it down.
They can't close it down. And it's important to remember that in the US, the federal government only provides about 10% of funding to schools. And it has nothing to do with curriculum or who gets hired to teach or how schools teach. So I think a lot of us are sort of wondering about the rhetoric saying that the reason that US schools are underperforming is because of the federal role, when really the federal government doesn't do a whole lot. But it's also important to note that the president can't eliminate those funding sources on his own either. That would require Congress to say, okay, we're going to get rid of Title I, which provides funds to students in poverty, or to IDEA for students with disabilities. And those programs are actually very popular across the political spectrum because they reach families in all parts of the country. And in fact, a lot of those programs disproportionately reach rural conservative areas, and it would be extremely unpopular if those funds suddenly went away.
Our commentator earlier on was suggesting that we're looking at this, and we need to look at this in various ways, but one of the ways we need to be looking at it is an ideological move. This is President Trump trying to clean out liberals from public institutions which he thinks have been mismanaged. I know it's a very difficult question to answer, but, you know, people are asking it, you know, are these public institutions full of broadly liberal people who have one particular political point of view and it isn't shared by the president right now?
So I can speak best to the Department of Education. It's the agency that I know best. And the main function of the Department of Education is to administer programs that are set up in law. And so it's really, the department is doing things like it's making sure that those Title I funds go to the schools that they're supposed to go to, that student loans move in the way they're supposed to move, that if you're applying for financial aid, that you have a working application, which actually has been an issue for the department because it was understaffed in the past. So it really is not a fundamentally ideological organization. It's an organization that exists to administer these programs and these laws much more than it's driving any kind of agenda or determining what it is that happens in US schools day to day.
Okay, Jon Valant, director of the Brown Center on Education Policy. Really appreciate your thoughts on that.